Good evening, everyone. On behalf of TaskMed, I would like to welcome you all to Medcast, Insights into Healthcare, a learning initiative by TaskMed. Today, it's a great pleasure to have with us Dr. Colonel Vinay Jetli, who is the Director of Invasive Cardiology and Electrophysiology at Fortis Escorts Heart Institute, New Delhi. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, we look forward to hear from you on today's topic of discussion, Mexiletine. Mexiletine, an unexplored antiarrhythmic drug. Over to you, Dr. Jetli.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for introducing me. And at the onset, I'd like to thank TaskMed for inviting me for this talk. So the talk is on Mexiletine as a drug in ventricular tachycardia. So we'll just go through it in about 20 to 30 minutes. So ventricular tachycardia, by definition, is a wide complex tachycardia at a heart rate which is greater than 100 beats per minute. And when we say it's a wide complex, we mean that the QRS duration should be 120 milliseconds. So obviously, when it's more than 120 milliseconds, it can also be a sinus tachycardia with the underlying aberrancy, or with the underlying bundle branch block rather, or it can be a supraventricular tachycardia with the underlying aberrancy, or it can be a ventricular tachycardia. So by and large, we will not go wrong if we consider that all broad QRS tachycardias are ventricular tachycardias. So if you go by that analogy, we are less likely to make a mistake in diagnosing ventricular tachycardia. So if we say that broad QRS is equal to ventricular tachycardia, we're likely to be right at least 80% of the time, and wrong only 20% of the time. So we must think of a ventricular tachycardia when we see a ECG with a broad QRS tachycardia. So there are various causes of ventricular tachycardia. Namely, we can have structural heart disease, both adult and congenital. We can have normal hearts, but having inherited channelopathies, namely the long QT syndromes. So you can have long QT1, long QT2, long QT3, and which can manifest with sudden cardiac death, especially in younger individuals. We can have infiltrative cardiomyopathies. And of course, secondary causes can also be there. Metabolic causes, namely hypokalemia, hypomagnesemia, and hypocalcemia. And drug toxicities, namely digitalis and substance abuse, example, cocaine. So what are the therapeutic strategies we have in the management of a ventricular tachycardia? So the first strategy would obviously be drugs. And we will just go through them subsequently, but conditions in which drugs are the agents of choice. For example, they would be the agents of choice in individuals who are not very symptomatic with these tachycardias. So if you are not symptomatic, you either take nothing or you take drugs. And if you don't have a risk of dying. But if there is a structural heart disease or there is LV dysfunction, then ICDs, implantable cardioverter defibrillators, become the first choice. And catheter ablation is increasingly being used for management of ventricular tachycardia, especially if the catheter ablation is in ventricular tachycardias with structurally normal hearts. For example, right ventricular outflow tract, which are tachycardias, which are symptomatic in individuals. The indication of catheter ablation is coming more and more in the forefront. Idiopathic left ventricular tachycardias also include the fascicular ventricular tachycardia, which are tachycardias of right bundle branch morphology with left axis deviation, or right bundle branch morphology with inferior axis deviation, so-called left posterior or left anterior fascicular ventricular tachycardia. So there also the drug would be a choice, for example, calcium channel blockers, but catheter ablation would be the choice. And sympathetic denervation, which is now called autonomic modulation, is being increasingly used, especially for ventricular tachycardia storms, in which we dissect and the sympathetic ganglion on both sides of the neck to reduce the sympathomimetic stimulation to the heart. So what are the antiarrhythmic drugs which are available to us? We have the Vaughan Williams classification, and namely the drugs are class 1, 2, 3, and 4. So these drugs actually have been used for many years, for many decades, I would say. But after the a landmark trial, that is the coronary arrhythmia suppression trial, CAST trial, all drugs, namely the drugs class 1A, 1C, class 3 agents, class 1A, class 1C, I would say, these agents were used in the treatment of ventricular arrhythmias in the setting of left ventricular dysfunction, class 1A and class 1C, that is quinidine, procainamide, diisopyramide, flecainide, propafenone, and borosizine. And it was found that they increased cardiac mortality, or they increased the arrhythmic mortality in those individuals, and the trial had to be stopped prematurely. So they came into disrepute in the setting of ventricular dysfunction. And we know that the commonest cause of left ventricular dysfunction is ischemic heart disease. So these antiarrhythmic drugs almost went into out of the limelight because of their increased mortality associated in the setting of ventricular dysfunction due to ischemia. Codaron is neutral as far as amiodarone is neutral as far as mortality is concerned, because it reduces the mortality because of arrhythmias, but it increases mortality due to non-arrhythmic causes. For example, there's a higher incidence of toxicity, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, and many other side effects of codaron. And so the overall benefit is neutral. It is not beneficial, it is not harmful. So it doesn't reduce mortality. And of course, beta blockers remain the cornerstone of treatment for arrhythmias, ventricular arrhythmias. Presently, oral mexiletine and of course IV lignocaine and IV amiodarone are used for ventricular tachycardias, but oral mexiletine is gaining prominence for its treatment, adjunctive treatment, I would say, in the setting of ventricular arrhythmias. These are the various pharmacological characteristics of antiarrhythmic drugs. We commonly use in intravenous amiodarone and intravenous lignocaine. So both the drugs have to be given, of course, amiodarone can be given orally also, but as I mentioned, there are a large number of side effects, namely corneal micro deposits. Everybody almost universally becomes hypothyroid. Also, because of the higher iodine content in the preparation, there is an incidence of hyperthyroidism. There is photosensitivity, skin decoloration. There are neurological side effects. Liver damage is also seen. And as I already mentioned, pulmonary fibrosis can be life-threatening and irreversible after the treatment of amiodarone. So amiodarone has a lot of side effects. All antiarrhythmics, we must remember, have a pro-arrhythmic effect. And amiodarone also, because of its prolongation of the QTC interval or the QRS duration, can also precipitate tossards. So though it does not usually cause proarrhythmias, there is a small incidence of increase in proarrhythmias even after the use of amiodarone, which we must be careful of. We have seen a lot of individuals who develop proarrhythmias after amiodarone, and amiodarone has to be stopped. And in such individuals, possibly IV lignocaine or oral mexiletine would be then the drug of choice. As I already mentioned, metoprolol is the drug which has to be given wherever possible. Metoprolol meaning beta blockers, whether it's metoprolol, IV metoprolol, or any other beta blocker. These are universally, they reduce mortality in the setting of LV dysfunction and ischemic heart disease. Mexiletine as a drug can be used orally, and it is the same group of drug as lignocaine. That is the class 1B group of drug in the Vaughan Williams classification. And importantly, as we will discuss subsequently, it has no markable effect on the ECG intervals. And the QTC interval, which I said in class 1A, 1C, and class 3, that is amiodarone and sotalol, is increased, the QTC interval. Here, it actually reduces the QTC interval. And hence, it has also been used in the setting of the long QT syndrome, namely the long QT3 syndrome, which we will see what it is. And the side effects, it is neutral as far as the side effects are concerned to the rate, to the AV conduction, to the QRS duration, and very few side effects are present with oral mexiletine. Ibuproquenamide is not really available in our country, so I have no personal usage with ibuproquenamide. We used to use it in some electrophysiological procedures, but when it used to be available, but I have not really used it in the recent past. And sotalol is a drug which really markedly increases the QTC prolongation. So it is an alternative to amiodarone or codaron or amiodarone, but has a marked prolongation of QTC interval. So oral mexiletine is the only agent which is really available, which is neutral as far as the effects on most ECG intervals is concerned. So mexiletine is approved in the treatment of ventricular arrhythmias, and the DGCI further uses it for arrhythmias induced by drugs. Of course, it is an adjunct, as I mentioned, adjunct in the treatment of ectopic beats or ventricular tachycardia after ischemic heart disease, adjunct to beta blockers, adjunct to amiodarone, can be used in combination. And it is also a treatment for idiopathic antiarrhythmic effects. So it's a relatively a newer drug, I would say, in the sense that in its usage has become more popular in recent times. And the 2017 AHA, ACC, Heart Rhythm Society, and 2015 European Society of Cardiology guidelines says is among the recommended antiarrhythmic agents to prevent or treat ventricular tachyarrhythmias or ventricular fibrillation. In 2014, mexiletine was also recommended from individuals who are suffering from symptomatic non-sustained ventricular arrhythmias, who have already been given beta blockers or a non-dihydropyridine calcium channel antagonist, meaning thereby that they were either on beta blockers or on diltiazem or verapamil, and the symptoms are persisting. So mexiletine can be added to those individuals who are having symptomatic but non-sustained ventricular arrhythmias. But I would say that where we are using it more commonly now is as an adjunct to individuals who have already received an ICD, may or may not have undergone ablation for substrate ablation for ventricular arrhythmias. Ablation meaning thereby that in ventricular tachycardias, in a scar, there would be areas of re-entry, areas of some living tissue which are identified. And these are added in addition to ICD. Ablation is used in addition to the AICD. And in these individuals, if the ventricular arrhythmia still persists, the drug mexiletine can be added to reduce the burden of arrhythmias and hence reduce the number of shocks or the usage of the ICD. So where does it act? It is all the class one agents act on our sodium channel blockers. So we know that the cardiac depolarization cycle of a myocyte and the conduction tissue goes through 4 phases. That is the phase 0, in which the sodium enters the cell. The resting potential, intracellular potential, is around -70 to -80. It enters and it raises the potential of the cell to +30. Once the sodium comes inside the cell, it comes out initially through a potassium ion, which comes out of the cell, and then it stops coming out of the cell, and there's again a re-entry of the calcium. So this is the potassium coming out of the cell, this is the sodium going inside the cell, the calcium again comes into the cell, and then subsequently the potassium again comes out of the cell, and the potential goes below the level from which it had started, and then the sodium ATPase enzyme reactivates and restarts the cycle. So these 4 phases are the phases of a cardiac depolarization in a cardiac myocyte oblique or a conduction tissue. For example, this would also occur in the Purkinje tissue of the myocytes or of the ventricular myocardium. The Antiarrhythmic agents, the sodium, the antiarrhythmic class 1 agents block this phase 0. They reduce the sodium entry and increase the potassium efflux. So sodium entry is stopped, potassium potassium channel is activated. So the more potassium comes out of the cell and lesser sodium goes into the cell. And what this does does this is that it reduces the duration of the action potential duration. Though the action potential duration is reduced, the ratio of the effective refractory period, which is the time from phase 1 to the phase 3, is increased. The ratio of ERP to APD is increased. Having said that, the total duration is reduced. So this is in short the mechanism of action of class 1B agent, which is a sodium channel blocker. So the difference between the class 1B, class 1A, and class 1C, as I've already mentioned, is that class 1B is neutral as far as the QRS duration or the QTC duration is concerned. Class 1A increases the duration of the QRS and the QTC by the maximum amount. Class 1C also increases, but less than class 1A, while class 1B does not increase the QRS duration or the QTC interval. So mexiletine is the oral congener of lignocaine. Lignocaine, IV lignocaine, we mentioned, is to be only given in an intravenous form because it has a very large hepatic bypass effect, meaning thereby that if oral lignocaine is given, most of it gets metabolized after absorption in the liver. So very little is available for the circulation in the blood. So everything has to be given intravenously to bypass the effect of absorption of lignocaine from the gut. While this is not there with mexiletine, which can be given orally. So it has no effect on the conduction system, or rather minimal effect on the conduction system. So there is no development of AV blocks, there is no development of third generation or second generation AV blocks, and there is no prolongation of ventricular depolarization or repolarization. So however, in patients with pre-existing conduction defects, if you already have a second degree AV block or a third degree AV block, it may increase the duration of those blocks. But in a normal individual, that means in an individual who does not have a pre-existing conduction defect, it has no effect. So this is how it acts. If you look at the drug, this is mexiletine in comparison with the other agents. Mexiletine and lignocaine belong to the same group. Lignocaine can be given only intravenously. Mexiletine can be given orally. So it has no effect on the SA nodal rate, on the AV nodal refractory period, no effect on the PR interval, no effect on the QRS duration, and no effect on the QT interval. So it is neutral, like lignocaine, on these intervals. If these intervals are increased, there is a tendency for proarrhythmias. It is possible that a critically timed ventricular ectopic beat with a prolonged QT interval may trigger a torsades by coming and depolarizing the ventricular myocardium at a point at the time when it is just about repolarizing or has just about repolarized. So if it is cardiac neutral, the risk of proarrhythmias reduces markedly. And this is what makes it a safer drug as compared to class 1A agent and class 1C agents. So this is the benefit of mexiletine, which unlike lignocaine can also be given orally. It has no significant negative inotropic effect. Beta blockers have a negative inotropic effect. Amiodarone, which also has beta activity, will also have a negative inotropic effect. It does not change blood pressure and pulse rate, and it does not cause myocardial depression, especially in individuals who have LV dysfunction and where the myocardial depression may already be present. So it is well absorbed, good distribution, low first pass metabolism. It is not metabolized in the liver, and hence it can be given orally. Elimination, only 10% is excreted by the kidney, rest is metabolized by the liver. The dosages, the availability of the capsule is actually 150 milligram. The Wellhart group, the mexiletine is available with 150 milligram, and it can be given rapidly when the control, rapidly meaning it can be given 3 times a day when rapid control of arrhythmias is essential. And the dosages may be increased up to 50 or 100 milligram increments. So up to a total of about 1000 to 1200 milligram can be given on a daily basis, but one should start with 150 milligram 3 times a day. This is the dosage schedules, and the maximum dosage would be around 1200 milligram. Contraindications would be that if there's already an existing second degree AV block or a third degree AV block. Side effects are minimal. And if we look at the management of a sustained monomorphic ventricular tachycardia, we would see that if there is hemodynamic compromise, then the cardioversion would be the first choice of management. But if there is no cardioversion, if there is no hemodynamic compromise, amiodarone, IV procainamide, IV lignocaine, or oral mexiletine. These would be the drugs which can be used in this particular study. So if you have structural heart disease, ventricular tachycardias, no hemodynamic compromise, then we can consider anti-arrhythmic drug therapy. Otherwise, if there is hemodynamic compromise, cardioversion would be the class 1 indication. So to summarize, that it is an agent as an anti-arrhythmic agent for sustained ventricular arrhythmia in individuals who have already on drugs to further act as an anti-arrhythmic agent to reduce symptomatic status, or in individuals who have an ICD, who have or have not undergone an ablation procedure to reduce the the magnitude and the quantity of arrhythmias, so as to reduce the usage of the ICD, reduce the number of shocks, reduce the number of anti-tachycardia pacing episodes. To reduce the number of episodes of ventricular arrhythmia, mexiletine can be used. It is safe in LV dysfunction. Unlike class 1A and 1C agents, we know that in coronary arrhythmia suppression trial, they cause increased mortality, but that is not so with mexiletine. It can be used in the long QTC syndromes. Namely, it has been used in the long QT3 syndrome, which is based on an abnormality of the SCN5A gene. That is the sodium gene, which is the phase 0 of the depolarization of the cardiac myocyte, or the action potential of the cardiac myocyte. Defects in that gene. So long QT3 syndrome, the mexiletine has been used. And it is the recommendation is not at the moment is class 2 recommendation for the management of ventricular tachycardias. And as I already mentioned, it can be used as an adjunct or an add-on with amiodarone and beta blockers. So the management of ventricular tachycardias involves 3 major modalities of treatment. It can be medicines, AICD, ablation, and very often all 3 are required. So the medical management adds to the device and ablation. Treatment of ventricular tachycardia can be challenged, especially when we see ventricular tachycardia storms, and it has to be individualized. In structural heart disease, LV dysfunction, highly polymorphic VTs, ICD is the first line of therapy. Catheter ablation is being increasingly used in adjunct to the ICD. Medical therapy is acceptable for the individuals who have undergone ICD and may or may not have undergone catheter ablation, or for those individuals who are minimally symptomatic with idiopathic ventricular tachycardias, and in low risk individuals with polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. So if individual has a higher risk, he has to undergo an ICD immediately. He or she has to undergo an ICD immediately. But if the risk is less, or the risk of dying is not there, or especially in idiopathic ventricular tachycardias, it can be an adjunct to the beta blocker or the dihydropyridine calcium channel antagonists. Thank you very much.
Very well elaborated, sir. So I'll request the participants, if they are having any doubts or queries, they can put the questions in the Q&A box or the chat box.
Yeah, so I can just say that just as a repetition that I think it's a very good agent. There was a problem in the recent past regarding the availability of mexiletine. A lot of my patients who were on an ICD and who were on mexiletine, there were quite a few of them. The mexiletine was not available in the market.
Exactly.
And there was a lot of difficulty in procuring it, and there was a lot of panic at that particular time. So I'm very happy that your group has bought out this agent. I think it's an agent which is a niche agent.
Yes, sir.
The usage may not be very widespread as in with other as much as I would say as Codaron.
Yes.
But as I mentioned, that it has its own role, and it is not that if that Codaron is some kind of a magic or Amiodaron is a magic bullet. It has a lot of side effects, which we must remember. So the usage of another antiarrhythmic agent is required, and I think mexiletine and Velhart has actually been a very good, I would say, a very good job in procuring and selling this particular drug, which is now easily available.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect, sir. So I think we can conclude if you allow, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir. I'll just conclude the session.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Jaitley, for joining with us today. It was really an insightful discussion for us as well as for our listeners. I would also like to thank you, all the doctors, for being with us and for their active participation during the session. Thank you and have a great day, sir. Thank you.